Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Preston Show, episode number 12. Glad you could join me, glad you could be here. We have a lot to cover with not as much time as we want. The first thing I'd like to start off today with is to go ahead and talk about what's fresh on my mind, and that's Vikings and Knightfall. I just watched the new season of Vikings. I just seen the new episode every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central Time. This show is really great, and the reason I like it is because if you follow the history of the Vikings, this is the only show that is a drama slash suspense slash action that you see stick to history and carry out a great show. So I was very impressed with tonight's show. I want to know what your thoughts are, but tonight's show definitely was interesting. It kind of started off the way I thought it would. As the show progressed, you see a lot of different characters coming into play and their parts actually taking hold. Now, there's a big war that's about to happen. It looks like Igor and his brother and the king basically the king has agreed to allow the bishop to live as long as he fights for their cause, and he's from the English army. Now, this is going to be an interesting part because he has already killed one Viking right in front of them, so I don't know where this is going to go. It's very interesting, the relationship between Igor and the bishop, so I'm really interested to see how that plays out. Other than that, Floki has taken a lot of people, and I'm surprised he got off with what he did, but Floki has taken a lot of people from the kingdom to where they believe is the land of the gods. Now, as so far, it does not look like the land of the gods, but it is definitely interesting to see where this is going to go and the type of character Floki's going to become. But right now, this is just crazy how many different parts and how many different ways the show goes, and it's hard to keep track of. If you don't watch every episode, you won't understand it, so you definitely have to check it out. This week's episode, we'll go ahead and say I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 because it definitely was rocking the whole way through. And I'm looking forward to next week's episode. We'll see. I've seen one preview for it already, so we'll see if they come out with another preview. However they do it, it's awesome so far. Knightfall, way more on the drama side. There's plenty of action for the action buffs out there. Some people say, do they really need another show like this about the Knights of the Templar Knights and the Holy Grail and the whole spiel, But I think they do. You got so many reality TV shows out there. I enjoy a fresh show, fresh cast, good acting. And this show has that. And I'm really impressed with the History Channel and what they've been able to do and have two great primetime shows. So I think that's awesome. Every Wednesday, check out Knightfall. That's at 9 p.m. Central Time. So wherever you are, base it off that. And I'm telling you, you're not going to be disappointed. The main butler that was the head of the butlers in Downton Abbey, which was a great show. The main butler, the one that kind of had the reins on everybody, he is playing a pivotal role in this show, and that is very cool to see. So I'm totally happy with this show so far. Tonight's episode was, yes, a lot of drama, a lot of politics, but the action was there. The story followed through. It left off where it should have and continued where it should have. So I'm happy with that. This show is a lot easier to follow along with than the Vikings. So, definitely keep your eyes peeled. There's a lot of other shows out there like Damnation. I've seen Black Sails, Outlander. There's a lot of shows out right now. So, I understand you might work your way to it. You might not, but it's definitely worth a watch. Moving on to something else that's fresh on everybody's mind. Every talk show has brought it up in the last 2 weeks. All the major talking heads are talking about Bitcoin, and they're really, really far behind. But what I will tell you is Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are trending up on social media, but they're trending down on the stock market. So what this means is don't lose your head and keep your head where your money's at. That's what you have to do. You have to continue to do your daily routine, your daily grind. You have to grind it out. And if you find yourself at the end of the year with the ability to invest money, and you're one of those people, then look at Bitcoin for what it is. Study it, educate yourself on it, and then you decide if you want to invest in it. But I believe that Bitcoin is just one of those entities that personally I kind of back off of it until I seen it stabilize. And so far I haven't seen it stabilize. It's very volatile. It's dropping massive points. It rebounds slowly and then it drops massively. I mean, it's all over the place. So when you look at Bitcoin, you really need to educate yourself before you do any type of investing into any cryptocurrency. Understand what cryptocurrency is. Understand that cryptocurrency is a currency based on trust. And without trust, and you have investors, early investors that have pulled out of Bitcoin. Now that they've pulled out, those were the early ones, the people that were there at the beginning, and they've pulled out. What does that tell you? So, I mean, you have to look at it for face value, and you have to look at your money as yourself. And a representation of oneself is how much money they have, and how much you're able to do with that money is going to be based on your education of the financial world. So you really need to understand before you do any investing what you're investing in. But you need to really take a look and educate yourself on cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin before you do any type of investing. It's flashy. It has the pizzazz. It's all in your face. It's all over the news. Don't get lost in the wind. My friends, don't get lost in the wind. Pay attention. Infrastructure bill. This is very interesting. The infrastructure bill is supposedly the next thing on the table. We've all heard it. We know what's going on. Why am I not surprised? Here's why I'm not surprised. Because infrastructure, no matter what party you align yourself with, libertarians, Republicans, Democrats, whatever, progressives, for the progressives out there, whatever you align yourself with, whatever party you decide you're going to be on that team, and that's your team, and you're going to represent that team, when you look at infrastructure as a whole, the money always comes from the taxpayers, and it's not selective. It's everybody. So together, we should all be able to agree that infrastructure is a priority, or we should be able to agree and come across the aisle and understand that infrastructure is not only a priority, it's a top priority, and it must be handled in this administration because we risk it going too far untouched. And many people are affected by infrastructure. Anybody that's able to drive, anybody that's able to go over a bridge, anybody that's able to go anywhere is affected by infrastructure. So you have to understand that a lot of local municipalities handle their own infrastructure. So when the federal government gets involved in infrastructure, you also must understand that federal land will be a top priority in an infrastructure bill that the taxpayers will flip the bill for. So you must understand that. This is how it has always been as far as the 21st century. Now, when you look at infrastructure and the way the payments are designed, because this is what I focus on. I focus on the bill. All right, what is the bill? And I don't mean the bill that's going to get passed. I mean the bill. How much does it cost? Right? Like when you're ready to pay the bill for dinner and everybody guesses at the table, whoever's the closest has to pay it. You know what I mean? Like that type of game that we used to play. The thing is, you need to really look at infrastructure as a payment plan. Here's the payment plan for infrastructure: taxpayer funded. That's it. There's no other source of income for infrastructure. There needs to be talks and agreements made. And I urge my congressman and my senator and all of my representatives and the president of the United States to hold these talks about infrastructure and other ways that it can be paid for without cuts, without raising taxes, and without sticking it to the taxpayer. There are other solutions. There are viable options on the table. Let me just throw a few out. We'll throw two out for today's episode. One is you take technology companies and you find a technology company, an independent technology company that is maybe not the biggest, but somewhat of a large company, right? It has to be big to be a company. So somewhat of a large company. You sit them down, you come to an agreement. In this agreement, you let the technology company lessen or completely waive the tax they pay on bringing money back from offshores. I'm a big proponent of keeping that tax, but I am a bigger proponent of lessening the burden on the taxpayer up front. And the problem is that no one wants to try, no one wants to ask, no one wants to hold the talks because they just may not know that that's an actual viable option. And it is. And I would like to see them take that up. And I'd like to see your congressman take that up. And I'd like to see your senator take that up. And I'd like to see the president hold those talks with the CEOs and let them know we can work out a deal. We can negotiate so the taxpayer doesn't have to flip the whole infrastructure bill. And if you do things of this nature, you will then see infrastructure be a more common thing, which in return will lessen the price wholly for everybody involved in the deal. Because instead of waiting 10 years, 15 years for an infrastructure plan, you can have this baby on autopilot. And if the company decides they're backing out, then the tax goes right back up. And they begin to pay that tax right away. I'm talking right away. And the negotiations have to take place. The negotiations have to take place for this to happen. It's a long shot, but it is a viable option that has not, don't let anybody fool you, it has not been tested. Those waters have not been tested. And they need to be, and they also need to be for research universities. Not your big Illinois university, not your Indiana university, but research universities. The way we pay for those need to be addressed the same way I am advising the Congress and the Senate and the President to pay for infrastructure, with companies getting a lessened burden of taxes than they already have at the 21% now, lowering the tax they come back with. So when they bring their money from Japan or China back to this country, they pay a whopping tax on it, which really totally devalues the whole purpose of bringing the money back. So now, if you can waiver some of that tax, lessen the burden, levy it, for goodness sakes, just make it happen so the taxpayer doesn't foot the bill for all of these things government wants to do when there are massive corporations out there that are more than willing to work and cooperate with the government to help us get a better deal and to help themselves, which obviously they will anyways. So at least if we could get something out of the deal, which is less money being paid in taxes, that is what we want ultimately. That is what we want to see back in our pockets, is our money. So the second option is a little bit more difficult of an option. It is not necessarily the most viable option, but it is an option that if put on the table, plenty of fish would bite. And this would, in return, better the relationships with corporations and individuals. It would better the relationships with small businesses and the government along with the people. So all of these relationships are intertwined at some point, depending on if you work for a small business or own a small business, depending on if you work for a corporation or you are running the corporation, depending on your job title, your job status. This is going to affect you when they bring up the word infrastructure. It doesn't matter who you are. It's going to affect you. It will affect you differently based on your job title and your job status, but it will affect you. The other option I will put on the table is to bring rich people to the table. And there are plenty of people who are looking for a way to distance themselves for their own political ambitions. What greater way than to come to the table, put up money, and say, I have money. I don't want the taxpayer to foot the bill. I'm putting this amount of money up to pay for the infrastructure plan. Now, again, this is more of a moral issue. As Jesus tells us, the rich man can't get into heaven. Why can't the rich man get into heaven? One says. The rich man can't get into heaven because the rich man will not give up everything he has to follow the Lord. It's a very, very undeniable stance on religion. Words from the Lord himself. Believe me. I don't want to be the religious type on the podcast and bang down the hammer or fist pump the Bible. I'm not that guy. But wisdom is wisdom. And whomever it may come from still is wisdom. Now, there's logic behind what Jesus Christ tells us. There is logic behind what God has in store for us. Is it logical to assume that if some rich people stood up, put up the money, that others would follow? And others would follow suit for other programs and other issues that the country has? Or will they be the ones, and remember I said this, will those same rich people that won't hold the negotiations or hold the talks, will those same people be the ones to say it's the government that should figure out a way to pay for it? And they shouldn't need any of their money. Because those same people, I am not mad at, but those same people will be the ones, when I tell you they cannot give up their money to follow God, those are the same people that can't give up their money to help the fellow man. It's an interesting take. It's an interesting theory I have, but I stand in solidarity with it. So we're going to move on. Last part of the show I want to talk about is an issue that's going to take place next month. This issue is going to take place in California. Beginning in January 1st, 2018, recreational marijuana is fully legalized in California. Many people in California are so high they couldn't tell you the difference. They believe it's legal anyways because of how common it is. Although common should not mean it should be abused. You understand? So when bad apples have flourished, good apples unfortunately rot. The problem that you will have with the pushback for the recreational marijuana will be the abusers, will be the people who get super stoned and go drive, will be the people that get super stoned and decide they feel like they want to handle a gun today. Don't do it. Don't ruin it for the rest of us. Be the example. Don't be an atrocity. Stick to what you know keeps you safe and happy. As long as it is not against the law, do not ruin it for the rest of us who would use this marijuana in a recreational, practical, very easy and calming way. Don't ruin it for us. Don't ruin it. I'm pleading with you. At the top of the hour, I'm pleading with you. Don't ruin it for us. Some will. Because people like risks. People like to take risks. That's why there's gambling. That's why there are casinos. That's why there's internet betting on whatever the hell you want to bet on. People like taking risks. There's an entertainment value there. But in general, people like taking risks. Whether they know that risk will pay off or not is for another day, another time. But people will always take risks. And you will always have risk takers that do these tasks unnecessarily, unwarranted, and really unwanted for the rest of society. But in the freest country in the world, in the greatest land in America, coming to you live from Illinois, just like the hands of time, I'm turning it over to you. Good night, folks.